The night I signed my brother's name on the marriage contract, I laughed so hard I nearly cried. Not because it was funny, but because it was the kind of cruel joke only life in America's old money dynasties could play, one where I wasn't even meant to exist. I wasn't the heir. I wasn't the chosen son. I was the stand-in, the shadow, the expendable younger brother. And yet, here I was, walking down an aisle in a perfectly tailored suit, toward Ethan Caldwell, the untouchable alpha whose reputation for ruthlessness could silence entire boardrooms. My brother was supposed to marry him to secure a corporate alliance, but he had vanished, leaving me with two options: ruin our family or become the sacrificial lamb. Ethan's eyes cut into me like glass the first time they met mine. Cold, calculating. Not once did his expression soften, not even when he placed the ring on my finger with a grip so tight it left a mark. People whispered that he was incapable of love, that his blood ran colder than the whiskey his family's empire was built on. But they didn't see the way his hand lingered half a second longer than necessary when he touched mine. Or maybe I just imagined it. The first weeks of marriage were a storm I had no umbrella for. Ethan barely spoke to me unless it was about appearances, schedules, or the family company's relentless demands. At public events, he played the perfect husband, gentle hand on my back, polite smiles, whispers in my ear that looked affectionate from the outside. But the moment the doors closed, silence swallowed us whole. "You don't belong here," he said one night, his voice low, measured. "You were never meant to." He was right. I wasn't supposed to be his. But my chest ached anyway. I told myself I hated him. Told myself the way his cologne clung to my clothes made me sick. Told myself his rare, fleeting glances weren't the reason I stayed awake at night. Until one night I broke. I had just returned from a gala, exhaustion weighing on my shoulders. My tie hung loose, my face still painted with the fake smile I had worn for hours. I walked into our penthouse, expecting silence, maybe a curt nod from Ethan. Instead, I found him sitting on the couch, jacket discarded, his expression softer than I had ever seen. "You're trembling," he said quietly, almost to himself. I hadn't noticed. My hands shook from too much champagne, too many stares, too many whispered rumors about how I was just the replacement brother. Without thinking, Ethan reached for me. His hand closed around mine, steady and warm. For the first time, the cold alpha wasn't cold at all. And that was the beginning of the mistake that would change everything. We didn't fall into love gracefully. It was messy, sharp-edged, and impossible to explain. Our first kiss wasn't tender, it was a war. Teeth clashing, breaths stolen like secrets. Every touch felt like both a crime and salvation. He wasn't kind, not really. But he was raw, stripped bare in those hidden moments, and I learned to read him in silences. The way his jaw clenched when he wanted to say something but didn't. The way his eyes softened when I laughed. The way his grip tightened around me as if he was terrified I might disappear. And maybe I was. Because one morning, I woke up and realized I couldn't breathe in the golden cage I had stepped into. I wasn't my brother. I wasn't the heir. I wasn't the perfect match Ethan's world demanded. So I ran. I left behind the mansion, the whispers, the diamond ring that felt more like a shackle than a promise. I vanished into a small town in the Midwest, where no one cared about dynasties or corporate wars. For a while, I almost convinced myself it was freedom. Almost. Until the test came back positive. I stared at the thin blue line like it was a death sentence. Or maybe a lifeline. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My heart wouldn't stop breaking. I was carrying his child. The man I had betrayed. The man who had never truly been mine. The alpha who had sworn he didn't want me. And yet, deep down, I knew the truth. He had touched me not out of duty, not out of cruelty, but because, for a moment, he wanted me. Now, I was left with the one piece of him I couldn't erase. The autumn air was sharp when I stepped outside the small rental house I had hidden away in. The world smelled of fallen leaves and distant rain. I pressed my palm against my stomach, still flat, still secret. What would Ethan do if he knew? Would he hate me more? Or would this child be the only thing that tethered us together, no matter how much I had tried to sever the bond? I didn't know. All I knew was that for the first time in my life, I wasn't just a replacement. I wasn't just living in someone else's shadow. This life inside me was mine, ours. And someday, whether Ethan wanted it or not, he would have to face me again. Ethan found me on a rainy afternoon, months later, when the leaves had already surrendered to winter. I was standing outside the small grocery store in town, my jacket pulled tightly around me, one hand instinctively resting over the swell of my stomach. I froze when I saw him, his figure cut through the drizzle like something out of a dream or a nightmare. Expensive suit, hair damp from the rain, eyes burning with a storm I had never seen before. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. "You ran," he said finally, his voice low, trembling between rage and relief. I swallowed, unable to look away. I had to. His gaze dropped, inevitably, to my stomach. My secret was no longer a secret at all. His jaw clenched, his nostrils flared, and for the first time since I had known him, Ethan Caldwell the cold, untouchable alpha looked undone. "That's mine." His words weren't a question. They were a claim. I should have screamed at him, should have told him he had no right. But the truth caught in my throat, too heavy to deny. "Yes," I whispered. "It's yours." The rain fell harder, soaking us both, blurring the edges of everything but the raw reality between us. He stepped closer, and I stepped back, fear and longing warring inside me. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice cracked on the last word, stripped of all control. "Because you would have hated me more," I said. My chest heaved with the confession. "Because I didn't want this child to grow up as a bargaining chip in your empire. I wanted just once in my life for something to be mine." Ethan's face twisted, his cold mask shattering completely. He reached for me, then hesitated, his hand trembling in the space between us. "You think I don't hate myself already?" he said, almost a whisper. "You think I don't know I ruined everything the moment I let myself want you?" The words knocked the air from my lungs. For so long, I had convinced myself he felt nothing, that every touch, every kiss, every night together had been a lie. But his voice, broken and desperate, told a different story. We didn't move inside right away. We stood there, drenched and shaking, two men caught between the lives we were forced into and the life that had somehow, against all odds, grown inside me. When he finally took my hand, it wasn't with the iron grip of an alpha claiming territory. It was gentle, fragile, as if he thought I might vanish again if he wasn't careful. "Come home," he said. Not an order, not a command. A plea. I should have said no. I should have walked away. Instead, I let him lead me back into his world. The return was brutal. The whispers grew louder, the headlines more vicious. Runaway spouse found. Caldwell heir to be born out of scandal. But Ethan didn't let me face it alone. He stood beside me at every event, his hand steady at the small of my back, his eyes daring anyone to say a word. For the first time, his public tenderness wasn't an act. At night, he would sit by the bed, one hand resting on my stomach, his face softened by shadows. He spoke to the child in a voice I had never heard before, low, warm, reverent. "You were never a mistake," he whispered once, when he thought I was asleep. "Neither of you were." I cried silently because I finally believed him. The birth nearly broke me. Hours of pain, panic, the sterile brightness of the hospital suffocating me. But through every scream, every tear, Ethan was there, his hand gripping mine, his voice steady even when his eyes betrayed his fear. And then, suddenly, it was over. The cries of our child filled the room. Small, fragile, alive. Ethan's hands trembled as he held the baby for the first time, his cold facade gone, replaced by something raw and unguarded. He looked at me then, eyes wet, and I saw the truth clearer than I ever had. He loved us. Not perfectly, not easily, but deeply, fiercely, with every jagged edge of his soul. Life didn't magically transform into a fairy tale. We still faced the endless politics of powerful families, the cruel whispers, the heavy weight of expectation. But in the quiet moments, late nights with the baby asleep between us, Ethan's arm around my shoulders, his lips pressed to my hair, I found peace I had never thought possible. He wasn't the alpha I had feared anymore. He was mine, and I was no longer a replacement. I was his choice. Months later, standing on the balcony of our home, I watched Ethan cradle our child against his chest, the evening sun painting them both in gold. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own life. You know, I said softly, stepping closer, I used to think this was all a mistake. Ethan looked at me, his eyes steady, his lips curving into the rarest, most genuine smile I had ever seen. Some mistakes, he murmured, are the best things that ever happened to us. I leaned into him then, our child between us, the weight of the past finally lifting. And for the first time, I let myself believe in forever. The world would always judge us. The dynasty would always demand. But in that golden light, with Ethan's hand in mine and our child safe in our arms, none of it mattered. Because we had already defied the rules. We had already written our own story. And against every odd, every shadow, every cruel whisper, we had won. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.